Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, issued a statement in tribute to his mother, addressed to Mummy, Mother, Your Majesty, 3 in 1. He said, Your Majesty, it has been an honour and privilege to serve you.
Since the passing of Queen Elizabeth and the coronation of King Charles,
and now King Charles's crowning moment, the first of 2 crowns to be placed upon his head.
Speculation about the contents of the Queen's will has been running wild. Traditionally, royal wills are meant to remain a secret for 90 years, adding to the mystery surrounding this one. But something unexpected just happened. Prince Andrew has reportedly read out the will before the royal family. This event has left everyone in total shock. But what exactly did it say, and why is it causing such a stir? Join us as we uncover the shocking revelations that made Buckingham Palace tremble after Prince Andrew read the Queen's last will. Andrew reads Queen Elizabeth's will. Prince Andrew stood up, holding a piece of paper in his hands. It was the last will of Queen Elizabeth, and everyone in the room was waiting for him to read it. The room was very quiet, like a secret was being kept. Nobody wanted to talk, and the silence had been going on for years. The air felt heavy with anticipation, as everyone wondered how this moment would change the future. Stay tuned, because what comes next will leave you stunned. This moment had been expected for a long time, but it still felt surprising. Now, everyone was gathered in the drawing room of Buckingham Palace, all wearing dark clothes and looking serious. They were all in the same room, but each person had a different reason for being there. Some people were hoping to get something from the Queen's will, while others were not sure what to expect. But one thing was certain: this was an important moment. The Queen's last will could change everything, and nobody knew what would happen next. Queen Elizabeth had ruled the country for 70 years, and that was a big deal. It made everything feel more important, like the whole country was holding its breath. Prince Andrew took a deep breath, looked around the room, and began to read the Queen's last words. The moment of truth had finally arrived. The Queen's will was about to be read. And it wasn't just about who would inherit her wealth or titles. This moment would define the roles of each family member, and possibly even the future of the monarchy itself. At the center of the room, Prince Andrew stood awkwardly, holding the envelope containing the Queen's last will. It was a surprise to many that he had been chosen for this task. Why Andrew, of all people? He wasn't the obvious choice, and many people in the room were uncomfortable with the idea. There were rumors about Prince Andrew's competence and whether he had the power for such an important job. Some people had expected Prince Charles or Princess Anne to take on the task, but instead, it fell to Andrew. Not only that, but there was another shocking twist that no one saw coming. Except for the family members, it was reported that the media didn't cover this event. The reason could have been the fact that a royal will is considered a private matter, solely between the members of the royal family. As Prince Andrew stood in front of the family, the weight of his mother's trust and the pressure of his family's eyes rested heavily on his shoulders. He felt the burden of responsibility and wasn't sure if he could carry it. But he had no choice. He had to do it. Prince Andrew took a deep breath as he reached for the envelope. The wax seal was still intact, and he broke it open. He pulled out the first page, and a sense of tension filled the air. Prince Andrew began to read the Queen's last will, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "This is my last will," he started, and the room fell silent, waiting with bated breath to hear what the Queen had to say. Stay tuned for the shocking details. It felt like the Queen herself was speaking to the room as Prince Andrew began to read the Queen's last will. Immediately, the mood of everyone in the room changed. Some people felt relieved, while others felt anxious. Prince Andrew realized that his mother's words would reveal a lot about her wishes and plans for the royal family. First, the Queen expressed her gratitude to her family for their support and dedication to the monarchy. Then, Prince Andrew moved on to the specific instructions the Queen had left for her children. He started with Charles, the eldest son. "To my dear son Charles," Prince Andrew read, "I leave Windsor Castle in your care." This was no surprise, as Charles had been prepared for this role his whole life. Windsor Castle, built over 900 years ago, is one of the oldest and largest inhabited castles in the world and serves as a royal residence for the British monarch. It is located in Berkshire, England, around 20 miles west of central London. It is one of the oldest and largest inhabited castles in the world and serves as a royal residence for the British monarch. King Charles, like Queen Elizabeth before him, will spend time at Windsor Castle. Also, the castle is often used for royal events, ceremonies, and family gatherings. And it's also where the royal family sometimes retreats for more private time. Charles didn't react much to being given the castle, just giving a slight nod to acknowledge his position. But then, Prince Andrew continued. This time, he read something that caught everyone off guard. "I have given Sandringham Estate to my daughter Anne," he read. Sandringham House was built by the Victorian architect James Pullum in 1870. It is a private residence of the British royal family and has been a holiday home for many generations. Queen Elizabeth traditionally spent Christmas there, and it holds a special place in the hearts of the royal family. This was a surprise to everyone in the room. Sandringham Estate was one of the most important properties owned by the royal family, and it had always been tied to the king. Now, it was going to Anne. The room was filled with a mix of reactions. Anne looked surprised, but tried not to show it. Charles's brow furrowed slightly, showing his discomfort with the decision. He hadn't expected this, and he didn't entirely approve. But Prince Andrew didn't stop reading. He moved on to the next part of the will. What's even more surprising is that Queen Elizabeth's will went against royal traditions. Normally, certain properties and titles would be passed down to one person, usually the eldest son. But Queen Elizabeth decided to do things differently. She decided to give some properties to the family as a whole, instead of just one person. This meant that everyone would share the responsibility and ownership of these properties. She also gave some properties that were meant to be shared by the family to specific individuals. One of these properties was the Balmoral estate. Andrew read from the will that Balmoral would no longer be controlled by just one person. Instead, it would be shared among several family members. Balmoral Castle is located in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. It was originally built in 1856 and was commissioned by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert as a private residence. Balmoral has always been a very special place for the royal family. It held many cherished memories, and sharing it was not just a practical decision, but also a deeply symbolic one. The personal touches in the will didn't stop there. Queen Elizabeth had made sure to include specific instructions and gifts for each family member. However, not everyone agreed with some decision. King Charles, in particular, seemed bothered by it. He looked uncomfortable as Andrew continued reading the will. This time, he revealed what the Queen gave to the younger generation. Stay tuned for the details. What Queen Elizabeth willed to younger generation. Prince Andrew's voice changed slightly as he moved on to the younger generation. He read out a special gift for Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge. "I give the Vladimir Tiara, which stands for grace and continuation," he read. Catherine's eyes sparkled with gratitude, but she didn't smile. Queen Elizabeth owned several tiaras, each with its own unique history and significance. Some of the most famous tiaras in her collection were gifts, while others were inherited. The tiara was a symbol of the monarchy's rich history, and now it was hers. It was a message from the Queen that Catherine would play a vital role in the future of the monarchy. Next, Andrew moved on to Prince George and Princess Charlotte. The Queen's words were clear. George had a big responsibility as the future king. He had a duty to his country and his people. Andrew's words hit harder than expected, especially given the tense atmosphere in the room. Everyone was waiting with bated breath to see what would come next. The moment everyone had been dreading arrived. Andrew's voice dropped as he read out Prince Harry's name. "I leave a ceremonial sword that once belonged to King George II," he read. But the room's reaction was immediate. William shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Something about the way the Queen had left the sword to Harry felt loaded. Was it a way of welcoming Harry back into the family, or was it something else entirely? The British ceremonial sword is a key part of the United Kingdom's royal and state ceremonies. It is used during formal events, such as the state opening of Parliament, coronations, and other significant state occasions. These ceremonial swords are highly symbolic and are often richly decorated, representing the authority, power, and history of the British monarchy and the state. It felt like a bomb had exploded in the room. Prince Harry wasn't there, of course. He had moved to the United States with his wife Meghan a while ago. But even though he was far away, his name was still part of the conversation. And that ceremonial sword? It was a big deal. The sword didn't just represent the royal family. It represented something more important. But there was something more to it, something that felt like a message. William, Harry's brother, was struggling to control his anger. He didn't think it was fair that Harry was still being included in important family decisions. Harry had made his choice to leave the family and the monarchy. So why was he still getting recognition? Charles, their father, was also upset. He was trying to stay calm, but it was clear that he was struggling. The sword was a sign of respect, but it reminded everyone in the room of how Harry had left the family and the monarchy.
And a large part of it for the family, but also the British press and numerous other people, was like, he's changed.
Princess Anne, their aunt, was the only one who seemed unaffected. She had seen the family's divisions before and had learned to deal with them. But even she looked slightly surprised when the sword was mentioned. No one in the room knew how to react. It felt like a message from the Queen. But what did it mean? Prince Andrew didn't dwell on that. He continued reading the Queen's will. And this time, he mentioned Prince George and Princess Charlotte. "I leave not only the treasures of our family, but also the knowledge I've gained over the years," he read. This was a big moment. The Queen was putting her trust in her great-grandchildren to carry on the family's legacy. Catherine, their mother, must have been feeling nervous and proud at the same time. The pressure on George and Charlotte was huge. They weren't just inheriting the Queen's treasures and titles. They were also responsible for shaping the future of the monarchy. They had to live up to the Queen's values, which she had held dear for so long. Andrew took a deep breath before continuing to read the will. He knew that what he was about to say would change many things. The monarchy's future wasn't just about owning properties or wearing fancy titles. It was about the younger royals, like George, Charlotte, and Louis, and their role in shaping the monarchy's future. Princess Charlotte is often considered as the spirited girl. The Queen's will made it clear that she has just as much responsibility as George. The Queen believed in her great-grandchildren and was counting on them to carry on her legacy. The Queen had always believed in keeping the monarchy balanced. She wanted to make sure each member of the family had an important role to play, no matter if they were a male or a female. This was also in line with the new law, the Succession to the Crown Act, 2013, which states that females have the same right to inherit the throne as males. Now, as Andrew read the Queen's will, Charlotte's part in this legacy was being revealed. Catherine's hand gently touched William's as they listened, showing their support for their daughter. This moment was crucial for them as parents. They knew how important it was to prepare their children for their future roles in the monarchy. As parents, William and Catherine understood the stakes. They weren't just raising their children, they were preparing them to take on responsibilities that would shape the future of their country. Andrew looked around the room again, taking in everyone's reactions before moving on to the next page. "To my great-grandson Louis," he read, his voice steady. "I leave a letter written by my own hand," he read. "A letter for you to learn from, to guide you as you grow." Louis was only a few years younger than George, but the Queen's message for him seemed just as important.
"This great hall has provided me with some of the most memorable events in my life."
She had left him something far more personal than jewels or property, a letter. And in that letter would be the words of a monarch who had lived through it all, who had seen the highs and lows of life, and had learned how to balance duty with compassion. Even though Louis was still young, he would be expected to understand and carry forward the Queen's message when the time came. The Queen's letter would serve as a guide for Louis as he grew up and prepared to take on his own role in the monarchy. As Andrew finished reading this part of the will, there was a moment of stillness in the room. It was as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next.
I don't know why I've collected that title, because I never have really parted.
But then, Prince Andrew wasn't done. The next part of the will addressed what everyone has been experiencing. But what could this be? Let's find out. The most controversial side of Queen William's. Conflicts within the royal family have long existed, even before the passing of Queen Elizabeth. As a result, the Queen's will may be seen as incomplete if it fails to address the need for family unity during such a pivotal time. This is what the last part of the will contains, and it was about to be read. The room felt quiet, like the calm after a storm. Andrew's hands were steady as he folded the last page of the will and put it down on the table. He looked around the room, his eyes meeting the faces of other family members. Andrew's words were slow and measured as he spoke about the Queen's final wish. She had wanted her family to find unity, even when they disagreed. She had wanted them to be strong during difficult times and to find meaning in serving others. The Queen's message was simple, but powerful. Andrew reminded them that their family ties were strong, but they needed forgiveness and understanding to last. Everyone in the room seemed moved by the Queen's call for togetherness. It felt urgent, like a message meant just for them, not just as a family, but as a monarchy. As usual, Anne kept her emotions under control. Her face was calm, but for a moment, her eyes betrayed her feelings. Andrew read on, and Queen Elizabeth acknowledged Anne's role as the family's anchor. She has always been the one that held everything together during difficult times. Quiet. That moment of recognition was important. Anne wasn't one to seek praise, but it was clear that her mother had seen her and recognized her strength. Even if Anne rarely showed her emotions, she often gave her mother a slight nod to show that she understood. Andrew paused, his look shifting toward Charles. It was clear from Andrew's expression that the Queen's words were meant for everyone, whether they were ready to hear them or not. The room was quiet, each person lost in their own thoughts, reflecting on this part of the will. But that was not all. Andrew cleared his throat and continued reading from the document. He shared the Queen's hopes for the future of the family and the monarchy. She had wanted them to change, adapt, and grow stronger with each new generation. The Queen reminded them that their legacy wasn't just about the crown they passed down to their children. It was about the values they lived by, the kindness they showed, and the relationships they built with the people they served. Most importantly, she emphasized that they were not just individual people. They were part of something much bigger than themselves. The Queen had also hoped that each new generation would continue to carry on the monarchy's legacy.
I have drawn great comfort and inspiration in calling for everyone to play their part.
The values that defined it. The crown was a symbol of that legacy, but it was the relationships, service, and care that would truly define their reign. As Andrew finished reading, he told the family that the Queen's work was over.
But also having that connectivity in family life, I believe. But they are now being successful in their own right.
Now, it was their job to carry it on. The room fell into silence again. This time, it was a peaceful silence, filled with thought. Each family member was lost in their own reflections, thinking about the Queen's words and the responsibility that now rested on their shoulders. Charles was the first to break the silence in the room. His voice was calm, but there was a firmness in his words that couldn't be ignored. He reminded everyone that their mother's words were a call to action.
So close to where my beloved mother, the late Queen, is laid to rest.
The responsibility they carried wasn't just a privilege, but a duty. He spoke about the need for complete dedication to the task at hand. His words held weight, and the others nodded in agreement. Their faces showed a mix of determination and contemplation. Even though each person had different ways of processing the moment, the Queen's vision for the future helped them focus on what they shared and what united them as a family. As the family began to move to different corners of the room to reflect on the reading, Anne stayed behind. The papers were folded neatly before her, and she didn't rush to leave. She sat still, staring at them, lost in her thoughts. The room was quiet once again. The Queen's words played over and over in Anne's head. She could hear her mother's voice in those words. a call to responsibility and a plea for unity. There was no denying the message. The job ahead of her family was big, but Anne had always been prepared for it. Her role had never been easy, and it never would be. But Anne had learned from her mother to be strong.
And Queen Elizabeth dedicated this National War Memorial in honor of all those who paid the supreme sacrifice in the Great War.
She stood slowly, carefully folding the papers back into their envelope, and took one final moment to collect herself before stepping back into the world outside. It had been a difficult day, but her mother had taught her to be strong, and once again, Anne would carry that responsibility forward. Outside the palace, the gardens were quiet, and life went on as usual. But inside, something big had happened. It would change the kingdom and the royal family forever. Anne knew the Queen's words would help them, even when they weren't sure what to do. Her mother's legacy would guide them, and Anne was ready to carry that legacy forward. Family members, still in shock, whispered amongst themselves, trying to process what they had just heard. How they would move forward remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. The Queen's will had set the stage for difficult decisions, and now each member of the royal family had to decide how to respond. But something even more strange came to light. It was the fact that some family members were conspicuously absent from the will. No mention was made of Queen Camilla, which left many questioning the Queen's intentions. The absence of Camilla could stem from the fact that she was never originally part of the royal family in the way that the public might think. Queen Elizabeth had always been a staunch believer in the importance of royal tradition, and there were rumors that she never fully supported Charles's affair with Camilla. In fact, there was a time when Queen Elizabeth had hoped for a union between Charles and Princess Diana, who she believed was a more suitable match, coming from a good background and royal respectability. Even after Charles and Diana's separation, reports suggested that Queen Elizabeth was not in favor of Charles eventually marrying Camilla. This tension seemed to have persisted for years, and one could argue that Camilla's decision to take the title of Queen rather than Queen Consort may have gone against the Queen's wishes. This move, seen by some as stepping beyond her designated role, only added fuel to the fire. But Camilla wasn't the only one left out. Meghan Markle, the wife of Prince Harry, was also absent from the will's provision. This omission raised many eyebrows, especially since there had been speculation regarding the royal family's disapproval of Harry and Meghan's marriage from the start. The family was reportedly uncomfortable with Meghan's outsider status, her previous life as a divorced American actress, and her desire for more independence from royal constraints, which clashed with the family's more traditional values. Equally shocking was the fact that Prince Harry's children were not mentioned in the Queen's will. Many saw this as a deliberate omission, one that could indicate deeper rifts within the family. While Queen Elizabeth had always spoken of family unity, her final wishes seemed to reveal a very different reality, one where certain members, particularly those who had chosen to distance themselves from royal duties, were left out. This added an extra layer of mystery to an already complicated situation, leading many to wonder if the Queen's true feelings were finally coming to light. What do you think about how Queen Elizabeth shared the royal property? Why do you think some family members were not mentioned in the will? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, click on the next video on your screen. You won't want to miss it.